last week, and I hope we keep this portion on the podcast. And if you don't know, we actually have a video podcast. We're videotaping this, right? And so then it gets about within a week, it gets put on to our website, livingroomstudy.org. So if you can't make it 1 week and you're like, man, I really would like, I missed that teaching, and somebody said, hey, that was a really cool teaching. Probably wasn't me teaching it. But, somebody says, hey, it's a really cool teaching. Well, then you can go online and watch it. Okay? And we realize that when you put things online, people from all over the world, that's why it's called the WWW, right? World Wide Web. People from all over the world can access it. And so there's actually people, and we know because we get diagnostics from our website, that in the program that we use gives us diagnostics and tells us that there's people from all over the world every week who are downloading and viewing the teaching that we have here at the Living Room Study. And I think that's awesome. And so if you're watching this, welcome. We're glad you're here. We hope that you're wanting to do good to us. No, I'm just kidding. I know, because there's people from certain foreign countries, I wonder sometimes. But nevertheless, we're glad that you're here, and we hope that you hear the word of the Lord as well. And last week I made a plea, and I'll make the same plea this week. Hey, if you're from a foreign country, that is if you're not from the United States, or if you're from Hemet, any of those foreign countries, send me an email, livingroomstudy@gmail.com. Livingroomstudy@gmail.com. Send me and say, hey, I'm in Israel, or I'm in Pakistan, or I'm in the Netherlands, or I'm in Hemet, For those of you in foreign countries, Hemet's actually a city just down the street from us, but that's why it's funny to us. But you do have to exchange your money for some reason into Hemet money, and we're still trying to figure that out. But nevertheless, if you are watching in a foreign country, I want to hear it. Just give me an email. I got one email last week from a lady from Belgium, and she's also a Facebook friend of mine. I'm Steve Wiggins, if you want to be my Facebook friend. And I asked, who was watching from Belgium, and she just says, yes, Steve, I'm the one from Belgium watching weekly the Bible study. I saw your latest online teaching. You astonished me with telling everyone present that some obsessed fans are watching weekly. The whole thing online. She said, I have a good laugh. I had a good laugh. I read the daily chapter as well, and you requested to send your email. And then she goes on to talk about how she also watches, Greg Laurie and Jeff Lassane and other people at Harvest and different people online. And it's just amazing the power. People think of the internet sometimes it's just for evil, and a lot of weirdo stuff happens. But you also have the opportunity to utilize the internet in order to leverage the gospel. And so there's people from all over the place that are watching in right now. And so those of you closer to the camera and the microphone, watch your language. No, I'm just kidding. All right, so here we are tonight again in Job. Once again, if you're from a foreign country and you're watching this, I just want to know who you are, and we'll probably read something online. I'll read it to the people here, at least a portion of it. And because we're encouraged when people want to read the Bible. I have found, and today I did music for Sandals Church, for their staff devotional at Sandals Church. And Matt Brown is a friend of mine, and Dex Alexander is a friend of mine who is an altogether separate. And Dex called me a few days ago, actually sent me an email, and asked if I would lead music and for their staff devotional, and I said I would be honored. And then afterwards we started talking, and one of the things we talked about was Living Room Study. And I just talked about how pretty much every church that I'd ever seen, I had never seen a church that had a comprehensive plan to teach the Bible, to teach it aggressively, and I said, and that's really the reason why Living Room Study exists, because I said, well, if one doesn't exist that I'm aware of, maybe it is out there somewhere, but we want to be a people who actually read the Bible every day. Crazy idea. We're Christians. We should be reading the Bible every day. Deuteronomy 6 and 7 says that, right after the Shema, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. It says, in these commands that I'm giving you today, you should teach them diligently to your children. And then it talks about when you wake up in the morning and when you're working and when you sit down to eat and teach these things to your children, talk about them with your neighbors and before you go to bed. He's like, I want my word to be on your heart all the time. Not just simply to go to church for an hour once a week. That's not a bad thing. It's good. The Bible says, don't forsake the gathering of yourselves together. You guys are now gathered together with a group of believers to hear the Bible here tonight. But the idea is that you should be in the Word personally. You should have a personal relationship with God through His Word. And that's independent of a saving relationship with Jesus. And a lot of times people say, well, do you have a relationship with God? And they go, yeah, I prayed a prayer, 5 years ago. And we're like, we're really glad that you prayed a prayer and you gave control of your life over to the Lord. How much have you grown since then? And how is it that you're growing in the Lord? And if you're not growing in His Word, then you might want to stop and consider, gosh, and how is my life now? And what we find is people that are growing in the Word, they can handle and they're capable of dealing with the pressures and the troubles and the turmoils and the trials of life better than those who aren't in the Word. And as a matter of fact, I would say that the trials that happen to us in life, I'm not talking about if I did something wrong and now I'm suffering the consequence for having willingly sinned against the Lord. That's a whole other thing. But if you're going through life and you have difficult consequences that seem to sort of sweep over the deck of your ship, so to speak, and you're standing there at the helm of your life, and all of a sudden a big wave comes by, and you're like, I didn't do anything to deserve that. And now you find yourself off the ship and floating in the water and looking for a life raft or some kind of handle on the moment. It's your faith which gets you through those seasons of life. And we're living in difficult times right now. I don't know if you've looked at the news today. Today was one of the worst days in the United States economy. As a matter of fact, it's one of the worst days of the world's economy today. I don't know if you watch the markets or not, but Greece is really slipping. When I say, which is funny to say, Greece is slipping, but Greece as a nation is falling, and the whole world seems to be looking at the Greeks, which I think is interesting. We never even looked at them until a couple of years ago, and now all of a sudden everybody's watching them because there's like dominoes. As they fall, Italy falls, Germany falls, all these economies which are sort of all intertwined together. Once one starts to fall, then they all fall. And what happened today was that Greece, troubles and people's concerns over what's happening in Greece, just was a massive sell-off in the markets and the futures, and which are the way that they forecast, certain commodities and things. I mean, those things just like fell sharply today, and the world economy just went kaput today. You probably didn't even feel it because you just got up and went to your job if you haven't been watching the news. But we're living in difficult times. Things are hard now. Things will probably get harder in the future. And what is it that you're going to utilize in order to get through this season and to live triumphantly, to live victoriously through the coming days or through the days that we're living in right now? And oftentimes we can, when everything's going well, we can boast of having such a great relationship with God and how, man, I would follow you anywhere, Jesus, into the valley of the shadow of death. You say you'll be with me, well, then I'll be with you too. It's like all of these great things. We even saw the Apostle Peter, back when he was just disciple Peter, saying the same things to Jesus. And Jesus says to him, he says, hey, just so you know, Satan has asked to sift you like wheat. And when you turn back, strengthen the others, which means this. He's asked to sift you, and he's been given the green light. Peter, you're about to get sifted. Well, who in the world gave Satan the green light? Well, let's see. Who could give him the green light? So the Lord gave Satan the green light to sift you, Peter. And by the way, you're not going to do as well as this, hey, I'll go all the way to the gates of hell with you. You're not even going to get to the gates of high priest of Caiaphas' house. You're going to be outside the gates of Caiaphas' house. You're not even going to get to the gates of hell. You're going to be out there and you're going to be denying me 3 times before the rooster crows in the morning. I'm guaranteeing you. But when you turn back, which means this. Number 1, Satan has asked for you. Number 2, God's given him a green light. Number 3, I know you're going to deny me. Number 4, when you turn back, which means that you will turn away from me. When you turn back, strengthen the others. Yeah, we can boast of having a great faith, but I like the saying, people are like tea bags. You never know what's on the inside until you put them in hot water. Peter was a tea bag. Outside of Caiaphas' house was the hot water. And guess what was inside of him? It wasn't faith. It was fear. And by God's grace, oftentimes, he will test each and every one of us, maybe several times during our life, to let us know exactly what's on the inside. To the contrary, you might not think you have a lot of faith at all. And then a trial comes up, and sometimes who you thought might have been the weakest person among you rises up to be a leader, and the Lord will raise them up through adversity. All the big muscle guys, who you think, man, I want to go into battle with that guy. Look how much muscles he has. Those guys are like, down in the hull of the ship clinging to life rafts. And then maybe sometimes who you thought was going to be Mr. Punyverse turns out to be a spiritual Mr. Universe. And then God will expose that so that people will follow a person they normally would never have followed. Until the hot water came on and you realize, no, wait a second, I would have thought you were the natural born leader. You're a coward. Not you, sir, but you're a coward. And I thought you'd be a coward in this moment, and you're a leader. You know what? I'll follow you anywhere. So God doesn't just expose faithlessness through trials. Oftentimes, he also exposes faithfulness. Stuff that you never even thought that you had on the inside of you. Fight or flight people. You never know which one you're going to be until the pressure comes on. And I mention all of that because that's the story of Job. Faith proclaimed is one thing, but faith isn't fact until you test it, right? Nobody walks by an auto lot, looks at all the cars and goes, oh, that one looks fast. I'll pay whatever you want. No, what do? You get in it, you take it on a test drive. And if you think the Lord's going to turn over responsibility to you in his kingdom without testing you, test driving your faith, and it's not so that he knows exactly what's underneath your hood. But you don't know. And so he will put you through difficulty. Job's this guy, we know the story. We've already talked about it for several weeks now. We got this week, and then next week we're going to end Job. Has Job seemed to drag on forever? For me, it has drug on forever. I'm like, okay, I really kind of felt like I covered all the major issues with Job in the first week. So now it's been week after week after week after week of almost teaching the same message every week. Faith isn't fact until it's tested. Satan and God still have these conversations. You're going to go through tests. You're going to suffer temptation. And yet, whenever you're going through a trial, doesn't that also seem to drag on forever? As if it's never, ever going to end? Sometimes I wonder if the Lord purposely did not make Job drag on and on and on. Every one of his friends gets to say something, and then Job responds, and then they all get a turn at Job, and then they all get another turn, and then they all get another turn, and it's just like, man, this is boring, and it seems to drag on forever, and it just keeps saying the same thing over and over and over again. And it reminds me of how stubborn that we are in our own sin. That we got to learn over and over and over again these lessons. It also lets us know that, you know what, even though this trial in my life may drag on forever, God will reveal himself directly eventually. So it is our job to know the Word so that we can cipher even the counsel from Christian friends that we're going to get. Know the Word so that we can not just combat the world, but so that we can also have a defense against worldly Christians. This is my karate stance. And so it's important for us to know that it drags on, and it drags on, and it drags on. And it wasn't until the end of the 40 days with Jesus in the desert that Satan shows up. So when your trial drags on and drags on, maybe you have some energy at the front end to fight this thing, but towards the end of the trial, you just kind of punch drunk like Rocky in the very final rounds, you know what I'm saying? Or like Sylvester Stallone just getting up today. But just waking up every morning. But it's like, it's like, and then that's when the enemy really comes in hard. So the hardest part of faith is like the last 5 minutes. I'd say the hardest part of Job is going to be the last 5 chapters. But we're going to finish it next week. Tonight we're going to hustle through a lot of scripture. Because Job talks for a long time, just like myself. So really this starts really at the chapter after the chapter I taught last week. Bildad doesn't have a lot to say, but he does try to get in a final jab against Job. So Job chapter 25. Then Bildad the Shuhite answered and said, dominion and fear belong to him. He makes peace in his high places. Is there any number to his armies? Upon whom does his light not rise? How then can man be righteous before God? This is the argument that started the whole thing. How can a man be righteous before God? Or how can he be pure who was born of a woman? If even the moon does not shine and the stars are not pure in his sight, how much less man, who is a maggot, and the Son of Man, who was a worm. Bildad and his friends, they have 2 extreme counsels to Job. Counsel number 1 is this: Job, you know why you're going through this trial, right? Matter of fact, we don't even consider this to be a trial. The Lord's not testing you. This is a judgment. The Lord is judging you. And while we don't know what sin you've committed, we can imagine the types of sin that a man must commit in order to have his family, his possessions, and his health, his reputation, and his honor all stripped away from him. So we don't know exactly what sin you've done, but we look at the consequences of your sin, and so we're going to start casting dispersions, and we're all going to be watching for your reaction, because we're going to hit on one of them, and when we see the way that your eyes kind of look up and to the left, or whatever it is they say that when people are lying that they do, and we're going to know that's the thing that you did. We don't know what it is, but it had to have been huge for God to have done all of this on you. It wasn't even in their theology that God would cause a trial like this, a test, and that it wouldn't be judging some sin, because it's just not even in most people's theologies even today that God would do this. Because they say, if you do good things, God's going to bless you abundantly. And if you don't do good things, then God's going to curse you abundantly. So when you see a guy going through a bad thing, a lot of Christians look at that person and they're like, obviously they're being judged for something that they've done wrong. Which means, I don't know that I really want to help that person out, because maybe they haven't come to the end of their rope, and maybe I'm helping them out prematurely. I think they should fall to the very bottom, and then when they're at the very bottom, then they'll ask for help. That's why Teen Challenge has such a hard time getting money. If it was children that were strung out on drugs, they'd have millions every month. But because it's grown men who are going through drugs and alcohol, there's a lot of people, and even a lot of people in the church, they look at the guys here at this facility and they say to them, well, why would we help them out? They're just getting what they deserved. We all went to college and got jobs, and they went and got and partied, and so they should be in jail. As a matter of fact, they shouldn't have gotten let out. See what I'm saying? A lot of Christians have that idea when they see people going through hard times. They think it's a judgment. They don't want to get in the middle of it. And they have spiritual pride. See? So on one end, his friends say, you know what? If you were doing the right thing, then God would be blessing you. If you would live a righteous life, God would bless you righteously. But that's one thing, right? But on the other thing, what they say is this: how could man be righteous before God? So in one sense, they say if you were better, then God would be blessing you again. But on the other end, they said God could never bless any man because he's a worm and a maggot. To which the retort should be to them, well, then why isn't he giving you what he's given to me? If we're all worms and maggots, then you're a worm and a maggot too. So why do you still have your family and your possessions and your reputation? You see, when you take false theology, even theology which is loosely based on Scripture, which all of these guys independently aren't saying wrong things, how can a man be righteous before God? That is the human condition. That is our real existential question. How can we, being sinners, be made righteous with God? That's why Jesus is of the utmost importance to humanity. Why? Because while we were yet sinners, while we were yet maggots and worms spiritually, that he chose to die for us. He who knew no sin became the sin offering for us. So in that sense, how can a man be righteous before God today? It's a relevant question still, and I would say through Jesus and Jesus alone. But don't take my word for it. Take Jesus' word for it, who said, I am the way and the truth and the life, which means there is no other way, there is no other truth, and there is no other life. He says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no man comes to the Father but through me. So I can answer Bildad right now, Jesus Christ. Chapter 26. Now this is Job's reply, and we're going to try to fly through this. Not just because it's not significant, but just because we're going to cover a lot of material. But Job answered and said, how have you helped him who is without power? How have you saved the arm that has no strength? How have you counseled one who has no wisdom? And how have you declared sound advice to many? To whom have you uttered words? And whose spirit has come from you? You remember Job chapter 4, verse 15. The first time that we heard those words, how can a man be righteous before God? We realize the source of that question, which has permeated this whole book, the source of half of their argument, has come from a dark spirit who came and spoke to Eliphaz in the night. He says, how can a man be righteous before God if he wouldn't spare even his own angels? How could he spare a man? So we realize the source of that philosophy and that idea, which gives hopelessness to men and women, is itself the demonic word of Satan. That's the source of that question. Job asked him, hey man, what kind of counselor are you? And whose spirit is coming from you that would have that kind of an attitude towards me? The dead tremble, those under the waters and those inhabiting them. Sheol is naked before them, and destruction has no covering. He stretches out the north over empty space. He hangs the earth on nothing. He talks about those who are under the waters and who are inhabiting them. He's not talking about fish. What's he talking about? It's a reference to the flood of Noah. Remember, all sin was judged in the world. I'm not going to go into a long dissertation on it, although we'll do it someday. Eventually, we'll land on the scripture again. But back in Genesis, it talks about a time, it's hard for us to wrap our minds around, when the sons of God, or basically angels, came into the daughters of men. And the idea is that there was a race of people, or that somehow humanity was somehow defiled and mixed, and it was part demonic and it was part human, and it was completely evil to the point where God said, I regret that I made them. And in all of that, he found one man, Noah, who was not defiled and who had bent his mind on following the Lord. And he saves Noah, his wife, their family, their in-law, basically his children and their families. And they went on the ark with him. And everyone else was destroyed. Now we know that the soul is eternal, which means that when we die, we don't just simply die, but the moment that we die, we enter into a whole other dimension, so to speak. A whole other reality. We leave this reality and we go to a whole other spiritual reality. And eventually all will stand before the Lord and there will be judgment passed. And so the penalty for our sin has either been paid by Jesus and we have received it, we have accepted it, or we haven't accepted it, which means that the penalty is still awaiting us. You go, what kind of penalty is waiting for me if I haven't accepted Jesus? Well, if you ever watch that the Passion of the Christ, and you see that Jesus, who's beaten and bloody and disfigured and the whole thing, awaiting you. Because that's the penalty that he paid for us. And if you haven't received the atonement which is offered because he paid the penalty for you, well, then that's what's awaiting you. And I would say that Hollywood still has not come up with as graphic as that was. They still don't have, you can't even comprehend what awaits for those who don't know Jesus in a saving way. And the great tragedy of it all is that salvation is offered to anyone who would turn from their sin and receive it. So the idea the soul is eternal. Bodies will die, they'll decay, you'll put them in a box, you'll throw them in the ground, eventually the water gets in, the worms get in, it doesn't matter. Eventually you're going to decay and you rot. The flesh part is going to go away. But the soul immediately moves to a whole other place. That's why we can stand there and say, Bob's not there in the coffin. He's in a better place. And that's a reality. So the idea is that all of that evil which was judged, there was a superstition, even in the days of Job, stretching into the days of Jesus, where, those souls had to go somewhere. So when those waters came and they consumed that race of people in that generation and they all died, all creation, all the animals, everything else, everything that was not in that ark died. So you say, where are the souls of all those people? They say, well, when the floodwaters went down, there's no drain at the bottom of the ocean where it all gets, goes down to some sanitation place. So the superstition is all those evil spirits are still alive because they're eternal. They must be at the bottom of the water. That's why when the Sea of Galilee is kind of rocking one night and they're all fighting against the sea, and here comes Jesus walking across the Sea of Galilee, what did they all yell out? It's a ghost, which is translated better, it's a spirit. They think the waters are churning so much, the waters have churned up one of those spirits from where? From the deep. Which kind of spirits from the deep? Those who were judged in the flood of Noah. Evil spirit. That's why they're deeply afraid. And Job is talking about it. He says, the dead tremble, those under the waters and those inhabiting them. Sheol is naked before him, and destruction has no covering. He stretches out the north over empty space. He hangs the earth on nothing. He binds up water with thick clouds, yet the clouds are not broken under it. He covers the face of his throne. He spreads his cloud over it. He drew a circular horizon on the face of the waters. At the boundary of light and darkness, the pillars of heaven tremble and are astonished at his rebuke. He stirs up the sea with his power, and by his understanding he breaks up the storm. By his spirit he adorned the heavens. His hand pierced the fleeing servant, which is sort of a reference to Genesis 3:15. Indeed, these are the mere edges of his ways. And how small a whisper that we hear of him. It's very different from the whisper that Eliphaz heard of the dark spirit in the night. How small a whisper that we hear of him. But the thunder of his power, who can understand it? You have the contrast. You have the whisper of God and the thunder of his power. Talking about the greatness of God. He says, moreover, Job continued his discourse and said, as God lives, who has taken away my justice. And this is really where we start to get a glimpse of Job's idea and the fact that Job's understanding of what's happening to him is not exactly correct. Like we said, the Bible says that he was the most righteous man of his day, but listen, he was the most righteous man of his day. Okay? It doesn't mean that he has it all down. It just means that compared to other men, he was the most righteous man. He was the perfect candidate for Satan to bring down. Because if I can bring down the most righteous man, then that says that no man could ever be righteous. And Job believes that the problem with his situation in life is that God is judging him wrongly. You ever felt that way about God? Huh? I have. Hey, why me? Why can't you pick on somebody who we know is sinning way more than me? I never go through difficult times and say to yourself, Lord, I am so glad. Okay, you got me in a trial right now. So I'm just going to keep a level head. We're going to get through this thing. I hope that I can do that better as time is going on. I probably do it a lot better now than I did at 20. But I still have a difficulty. Every time difficult times come up, it's like, Lord, can you not, what happened to all that blessing that everybody keeps talking about? Or you're going to give, can I just get a coast here so that I can minister to these people? And I feel like it's like, well, you know what? My captains and my lieutenants, I put tests on them a lot more than I put on the people that aren't doing nothing. That's what it feels like. Job's problem is that he believes that God has made an error, and he's judging me wrongly. Somehow he's got wrong evidence about me, and he's judging me. Once again, the problem is that this is not judgment. This is a test. As God lives, who has taken away my justice, and the Almighty who has made my soul bitter. The Almighty has not made your soul bitter. Your response to what the Almighty is allowing in your life is making your soul bitter. I'm not just talking about the power of positive thinking, I'm talking about the power of biblical thinking. And always trying to process what we don't know about our circumstances. Try to process what you don't know about your circumstances through what you do know about God. It feels like I'm being unjustly judged, but here's what I know. God is omniscient, which means what? He's all-knowing. He knows all things. It's not like there's any evidence that's kind of slipped his mind. Oh, yeah, thanks for reminding me, Steve. I'm going to lift this judgment off of you now. You know how it is. I'm really, really old. I'm like eternity old, and sometimes I just get the Alzheimer's. You don't have to worry about that with him. What else don't you have to worry about? Is he here right now? Does he understand? Does he see right now? Not only is he omniscient, he knows all, he's omnipresent. He's here with you right now. And him totally being right here with you, sitting next to you right now, in between the person that's sitting next to you and you. He can totally be sitting next to you and be sitting next to the person next to you and be sitting next to he's everywhere all the time. He's present. He's not distant as you may feel that he is in times. God, you're so far from me. But he's here with us. And he knows. And not only that, but he's powerful, which means that he's all-powerful, which means that he has the ability, if he wants to change our circumstances. There was a moment with Jesus where there's a huge storm happening. A lot of this stuff's happening on Sea of Galilee. It's like you figured they'd find a different lake. But there's this thing, and there's a storm coming up, and they're all freaking out because the Bible says that the waves are starting to swamp the boat. And so what do? They do what I would do. Jesus is in the front of the boat, and what's he doing? He's asleep. Wave is swamping the boat, and Jesus is asleep. And what do? They wake him up. That's what I would do. Wake him up. Get the Messiah up here, man. Get some of that wave your hand stuff. And he gets up, but what does he do before he rebukes the waves? He rebukes what? The people. Why'd you wake me up? I always wonder sometimes, you think that was the time when he wanted to show them all that they could walk on water? When their boat was completely swamped and they had no other way except to drown? Do you ever wonder if they hadn't woke him up, what would have happened? We'll never know because they woke him up. Could have been, it's like, okay, I'm yawning and stretching. You guys all, come on, get up here. And they're all like, we're all walking on water. This is crazy. Who knows? Because they woke him up. I remember being in a difficult season of my life in Franklin, Tennessee, and I'd put an Ebenezer stone down in my backyard. And my wife said, make sure that it's flat so that our neighbors don't see it and think that you're like worshiping like a tombstone or something. But I put it to remind me of all the times when the Lord had come through for me, because I was going through a difficult season and I really didn't think he was going to come through. And I remember one night sitting there, one evening, sitting there at the breakfast table that we had right there with a bay window where we could sort of look out the backyard. And I remember looking down at that rock, and saying, Lord, the waves are crashing over my boat, and I think you're sleeping. And I'm going to wake you up right now, but I'm not waking you up to tell you to do something about it. I just want to wake you up to let you know that I'm not waking you up. I was trying so hard to find a language that I could talk to Jesus without being one of those guys. I know what that feels like. And the Almighty who has made my soul bitter, verse 2, as long as there's breath in me, the breath of God's in my nostrils, my lips will not speak wickedness, nor my tongue utter deceit. Here's what I like about this. You know what? Satan said, if you do all this stuff to him, he will surely curse you to your face. To me, this is the great no, I won't. And we have to purpose in our hearts before we go into a trial, before trials happen, we have to purpose in our heart that no matter what happens in life, we hold on to our faith. And we don't trade what we don't know for what we do know. Don't trade the uncertainty of your circumstances for what you know about the certainty of God and his character. He's omniscient, he's omnipresent, he's all-powerful, and his character never changes. Far be it from me that I should say that you were right. Verse 5, till I die, I will not put away my integrity from me. That should be a mantra for each of us. Not that I believe in mantras. My righteousness I hold fast and will not let it go. My heart shall not reproach me as long as I live. May my enemy be like the wicked, and he who rises up against me like the unrighteous. For what is the hope of the hypocrite? Which is interesting. Though he may gain much, if God takes away his life. Will God hear his cry when trouble comes upon him? Will he delight himself in the Almighty? Will he always call on God? That's a question. Do you have the hope of the faithful, or do you have the hope of the hypocrite, which only trusts in the Lord when it's convenient? Those are the people who receive the name of the Lord how? In vain. Because when times get hard, then they abandon their hope in the Lord and his promise that if we just endure, that we will get through this and the Lord will somehow be with us through the whole part. They abandon that whole thing and they just go for whatever seems like it feels right to the seat of their pants. If you don't know the word, you won't rely on it when hard times come. You'll rely on something else. That's why it's important to know the word so that we can know what to fall back on. This is where we get our hope. We get our hope from the promise of one who doesn't change his mind, whose character doesn't change. He says, I was going to bless them through Jesus, but I've changed my mind now. Verse 11, I will teach you about the hand of God. What is with Almighty, I will not conceal. Surely all of you have seen it. Why then do you behave with complete nonsense? This is the portion of a wicked man with God, and the heritage of oppressors received from the Almighty. If his children are multiplied, it is for the sword, and his offspring shall not be satisfied with bread. Those who survive him shall be buried in death, and their widows shall not weep. Though he heaps up silver like dust and piles up clothing like clay, he may pile it up, but the just will wear it, and the innocent will divide the silver. He builds his house like a moth, like a booth which a watchman makes, which is just a temporary lean-to. The rich man will lie down, but will not be gathered up. He opens his eyes, he is, and he is no more. Terrors overtake him like a flood. Once again, it's the image of the flood. And tempest steals him away in the night. The east wind carries him away, and he is gone. It sweeps him out of his place. It hurls against him and does not spare. He flees desperately from its power. Men shall clap their hands at him and shall hiss him out of his place. You're right. For the kind of guys who do the kind of stuff that you're accusing that I have done, this is exactly what is due to them, to which I'm sure his friend said, and so, all these things have been done to you. But Job maintains his integrity. No, but all these things have been done to me. Yes, they're reserved for people who sin like you say that they sin, but I haven't done those things. And once again, they just have no idea, no concept which says that God would allow such a thing to a just person. Chapter 28, surely there is a mine for silver and a place where gold is refined. Iron is taken from the earth, and copper is smelted from ore. Man puts an end to darkness and searches every recess. For ore in the darkness and the shadow of death, he breaks open a shaft away from people in places forgotten by feet. They hang far away from men. They swing to and fro. As for the earth, from it comes bread, and underneath it is turned up by fire. Its stones are the source of sapphires. It contains gold dust that path no bird knows, nor has the falcon eye seen it. The proud lions have not trodden it, nor has the fierce lion passed over it. It puts his hand on the flint. He overturns the mountains at the roots. He cuts out channels in the rocks, and his eyes see every precious thing. He dams up the streams from trickling. What is hidden, he brings forth to light. What's he talking about? He's talking about the wisdom of men in contrast to the wisdom of other creatures. Okay? You think, well, the eagle has a wisdom because he soars above everything, and the lion has a wisdom because he's the king of the jungle, so to speak, and the falcon has a wisdom because he's such a keen eye for hunting, and all of these things in nature, there's a wisdom to them, but there's a wisdom of man which goes even further than that. Men know how to get underneath the earth. Men know how to get to where the stuff that's really valuable, stuff like rubies and sapphires, and when I was in South Africa several years ago, they took me to a place called Gold Reef City, and it was an old gold mine. My wife would never have gone down into this gold mine shaft that we went into. We all got into an elevator, and then they took us down a dark, just barely dimly lit shaft, and we went down something like a quarter of a mile into the ground. They said it would go down a mile. We didn't go that far. A quarter of a mile into the ground down a little shaft, and when we got there, the thing stops, and I'm not claustrophobic, and I was starting to freak out. We were way down below the ground. Then they turned on a little light, ding, 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 and the little light bulb comes on, and then a couple of others string down, and then they show you what it's like to be underneath a mine. And how these men, think about that. This is electric lights. Can you imagine guys down in mining? Coal mining in the 1800s when all you had was gas lamps. Well, how about 800 BC? And you're how sophisticated is that they learn that you can go down into the ground and you could find gold? And that takes a lot of wisdom. You ever watch How It's Made on TV? I love that. Who builds those machines that make coat hangers? I have no idea. But some genius guy figured it out. And all these moving parts, and they spray paint them, and they move them, and they get them, and they put them on the boxes, and there's not a hand touches it. And somebody had to design all that stuff, and it's all done with pinpoint accuracy, and it all goes in the box just right, and we just go to Walmart and complain that they're too expensive. I watch How It's Made, and I think, after I watch that, these coat hangers should, for the work that goes into making a coat hanger and packaging it, that should cost like $1,000. So sophisticated, the wisdom of men. It's so much higher. People say, remember the environments used to go, hey man, the dolphin is like the smartest organism ever in the world. I'm like, really? Where's all the dolphin superhighways? Just help me with that. How many coat hangers are dolphins making? Not a one. Fail. That's wrong philosophy. No, we're way superior to animals. But now, how much more superior is God than man? Check out verse 12. He says, but where can wisdom be found? Oh yeah, we can mine for gold, and we can mine for sapphires. We can cut holes and do all kinds of, but where do we get wisdom? You see, it still eludes men, no matter how sophisticated we are. And the New Testament talks about, hey, there's a foolishness, which is actually the wisdom. It's the people of the world think that we are fools right now, wasting our Tuesday night reading an arcane book that has no relevancy to our society today. How foolish are we? No, how wise are we? How great is God that He has put it into our hearts to seek this wisdom. And they think they're so wise, all these PhDs, and they're making factories that make coat hangers and other sophisticated items. But how foolish are they that in all their wisdom they've explored all of these things, and yet they haven't explored the one thing which could save their souls from hell. Where can wisdom be found? And where is the place of understanding? Man does not know its value, nor is it found in the land of the living. The deep says, it's not in me, and the sea says, it's not with me. It can't be purchased for gold, nor can silver be weighed out for its price. It cannot be valued in the gold of Ophir, and the precious onyx or sapphire. Neither can gold or crystal equal it. Nor can it be exchanged for jewelry of fine gold, nor mention be made of coral or quartz. For the price of wisdom is above rubies, and topaz of Ethiopia cannot equal it, nor can it be valued in pure gold. For where does wisdom come from, and where is the place of understanding? It is hidden from the eyes of all living, and concealed from the birds of the air. Destruction and death say, we have heard a report about it with our own ears. God understands its ways, and He knows its place, for He looks to the ends of the earth, and He sees under the whole heavens. There's a perspective and a vantage point that God has that we don't have. And He sees wisdom. He created wisdom. And if you seek Him, He will impart it to you. Why are all these things happening to me? I have no idea the wisdom of all this trial that I'm going through. This is Job speaking. But I know one who does know. It's God. And I know one thing, I'm not going to speak a word against Him. Verse 20, from where does wisdom come, and where is the place of understanding? It is hidden from the eyes of all living and concealed from the birds of the air. Destruction and death say, we have heard a report about it with our ears. God understands His way, and He knows its place, for He looks to the ends of the earth, and He sees under the whole heavens to establish a weight for the wind and apportion the waters by measure. When He made a law for the rain and a path for the thunderbolt, and He saw wisdom, and He declared it, and He prepared it. Indeed, He searched it out. And to man He said, behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom. You want to be wise in this world? Fear the Lord. Not just be afraid of the Lord, but I'm saying give Him the honor and the respect that is due Him. The glory and the praise and the honor that is due Him, that is what is wise in this world. He says, to fear the Lord, that is wisdom, and to depart from evil is understanding. I could tell you how to live your life, and you would have that knowledge, and there's wisdom in it, because I'm telling you the words of the Lord. I'm literally reading you the words of the Lord. But understanding is to take that wisdom and to apply it to your life. I understand that. And so therefore I'm changing the way I'm doing business based on the wisdom which has been imparted to me. That's why Jesus could teach in parables. He could tell a story, and those who just heard it as a story said, okay, good story, Jesus. But those who saw the wisdom in what he was saying, it would change their lives forever. Because they turned from their sin, and they would turn to live their lives according to the wisdom which was imparted to them. It's one thing to hear the gospel. It's one thing to go to church and to be able to ascend and to say, you know what? I know that Jesus died on the cross. He paid the penalty for my sin. I believe that he rose from the grave, and he's alive today, offering eternal life to anyone who would believe. I understand the gospel. It's another thing to receive it to the point where you turn from your sin and you follow Jesus. You can know who Jesus is without knowing him in a saving way. The Bible says the devil believes and trembles. He doesn't believe in a saving way, but he knows that Jesus is the Son of God, died on a cross, rose from the grave, is alive today. The devil knows all of this, and yet we don't expect to see him in heaven. It's one thing to know who Jesus is and to know what he did. It's another thing to accept it. And when I say accept it, I don't mean just simply to say, okay, I get what you're saying. That's to hear the wisdom. But to accept it is to have the understanding to the point to say, you know what? I believe it, and I'm changing my life to live according to it. I can tell you right now, change your oil and rotate your tires every 3,000 miles. If you don't do it, your tires will go bald prematurely, and you will blow your engine eventually. It's one thing to have the wisdom. It's another thing to have the understanding, which says, okay, I'm going to apply that wisdom in such a way that I can save myself trouble in the future. Except the wisdom that we're talking about is the kind of trouble that could save you from trouble eternally. And if you don't want to apply that wisdom and understanding, it can affect you eternally. Chapter 29, Job further continues his discourse, and he said, oh, that I were as in months past, as in days when God watched over me. You know, not a lot of time has gone by in Job's life, by the way. When his lamp shone above my head, and when by his light I walked through darkness, just as I was in the days of my prime, when the friendly counsel of God was over my tent, when all the Almighty was yet with me, when my children were around me, when my steps were bathed with cream, and the rocks poured out rivers of oil with me. When I went out to the gate by the city, and I took my seat in the open square, and the young men saw me, and they hid, and the aged arose, and they stood. The princes refrained from talking, and they put their hand on their mouth, and the voices of nobles was hushed, and their tongue stuck to the roof of their mouth. And when the ear heard, then it blessed me. And when the eye saw, then it approved me, because I delivered the poor who cried out, and the fatherless, and the one who had no helper. The blessing of a perishing man came upon me, and I caused the widow's heart to sing for joy. I put on righteousness, and it clothed me, and my justice was like the robe and a turban. I was eyes to the blind. I was feet to the lame. I was father to the poor. And I searched out the case that I did not know. I broke the fangs of the wicked and plucked the victim from his teeth. And then I said, I shall die in my nest and multiply my days as with the sand. And the root is spread out spread out to the waters. And the dew lies all night on my branch. My glory is fresh within me, and my bow is renewed in my hand. Men listened to me and waited and kept silence for my counsel. After my words they did not speak again, and my speech settled on them as dew. They waited for me as for the rain, and they opened their mouth wide as for spring rain. And if I mocked at them, they did not believe it. And the light of my countenance they did not cast down. I chose the way for them and sat as chief. So I dwelt as a king in the army, as one who comforts mourners. Oh man, the glory days, Job is saying. There was a day when I showed up, I was the man. I was the man. That was then. I remember last year about this time when we lost our house, and an attorney showed up at our house and says, hey, we bought your house in foreclosure. I remember having thoughts just like what Job is saying. What the heck happened to you, Steve Wiggins? You remember 10 years ago when you had the number one song in the country and you'd had a string of number one songs in the country? You had paid cash for your last car. You had money in the bank. You had no credit. I mean, you had credit for days. You had no credit card debt. You had nothing. You were completely at the top of the world. People were calling you trying to get into the music business, trying to see if you could put in a kind word for a guy so that they could get a foot in the door. I remember I sat in my driveway in my car and I thought about the glory days. People were calling me, Steve, could you give me your opinion about the most benign things in the world? Oh, yeah, where's my opinion about that? You know, because you were riding high. You were the conduit for somebody else's success. If I could just get to that guy, he could get me to those guys, and I would. And now here I am. I've lost everything. I got to tell you, I can empathize with little Job. When he reads this, I think to myself, gosh, that was like me, 1998. I lived that life. Probably not to the extent that he did. That was then. I remember sitting there thinking to myself, man, if I called some of those same people who were asking me for help years ago, they wouldn't even answer my phone call. I'm not that marketable anymore. Nobody wants to market a guy who's lost everything. They want to attach their star to a guy who's going to take them places. I thought to myself, not only do I not have anything, but I don't know that I have any hope of getting anything. And all those people who were looking to me at one point for help, I can't turn to them for help even. I'm a byword. Chapter 30, but now they mock at me, men younger than me, whose fathers I disdain to put with the dogs of my flock. Indeed, what profit is the strength of their hands to me? Their vigor is perished. They are gaunt from want and famine, fleeing late into the wilderness, desolate and waste, who pluck mallow by the brushes and the broom tree roots for their food. They are driven out from among men. They shouted at them as a thief. They had to live in the clefts of the valleys, in the caves of the earth and the rocks. Among the brushes they brayed, under the nettles they nestled. They were the sons of fools, yes, sons of vile men. They were scourged from the land, and now I am their taunting song. Yes, I am their byword. They abhor me. They keep far from me. They do not hesitate to spit in my face, because he has loosened my bowstring and afflicted me. They have cast off restraint before me. In my right hand, the rabble arises. They push away my feet. They raise against me their ways of destruction. They break up my path. They promote my calamity. They have no helper. They come as broad breakers under the ruinous storm. They roll along. Terrors are turned upon me, and they pursue my honor as the wind, and my prosperity has passed like a cloud. And now my soul is poured out because of my plight. The days of my affliction take hold of me. My bones are pierced in me at night, and my gnawing pains take no rest. By great force my garment is disfigured. It binds me about as a collar of my coat. He has cast me into the mire, and I have become like dust and ashes. I cry out to you, God, but you do not answer me. I stand up, and you regard me, but you have become cruel to me. With the strength of your hand you oppose me. You lift me up to the wind and cause me to ride on it. You spoil my success, for I know that you will bring me to death and to the house appointed for all the living. Once again, he feels that God is judging him unjustly. Surely he would not stretch out his hand against a heap of ruins. If they cry out when he destroys it, have I not wept for him who was in trouble? Has not my soul grieved for the poor? But when I looked for good, evil came to me. I'm looking for a reward for all the things that I've done. I've been doing good things out here, Lord, and I'm looking for a reward. And what are you giving me? You're giving me grief and evil. And when I waited for light, then came darkness. I'm looking for a return on my investment, God. My heart is in turmoil and cannot rest. Days of affliction confront me. I go about mourning, but not in the sun, and I stand up in the assembly, and I cry out for help. I am a brother of jackals and a companion of ostriches. My skin grows black and falls on me. My bones burn with fever. My harp is tuned to mourning, which is it's a very poetic way to say this. My harp is tuned to mourning, and my flute to the voice of those who weep. Chapter 31. We're just reading through it. I have made a covenant with my eyes. Why then should I look upon a young woman? For what is the allotment of God from above? And the inheritance of the Almighty from on high? Is it not destruction for the wicked and disaster for the workers of iniquity? Does not he see my ways and count all my steps? Basically, I've chosen to not look lustfully upon women because I know that the Lord will judge a man who does this. But now look what has come upon me. Verse 5, if I have walked with falsehood, or if my foot has hastened to deceit, let me be weighed on honest scales, that God may know my integrity. If my step has turned from the way, or my heart walked after my eyes, or if any spot adheres to my hands, then let me sow and another eat. Yes, let my harvest be rooted out. If my heart has been enticed by a woman, or if I have lurked at my neighbor's door, then let my wife grind for another, and let others bow down over her. For that would be wickedness. Yes, it would be iniquity deserving of judgment. For that would be a fire that consumes to construction and would root out all my increase. If I have despised the cause of my male or female servant, when they complained against me, what then shall I do when God rises up? When he punishes, how shall I answer him? Did not he who made me in the womb make them? And did not the same one fashion us in the womb? If I have kept the poor from their desire, or caused the eyes of the widow to fail, or eaten my morsel by myself, so that the fatherless could not eat of it, but from my youth I reared him as a father, and from my mother's womb I guided the widow. And if I have seen anyone perish for lack of clothing, or any poor man without covering, if his heart has not blessed me, and if he is not warmed with the fleece of my sheep, if I have raised my hand against the fatherless, when I saw that I had help in the gate, then let my arm fall from my shoulder, let my arm be torn from the socket. For destruction from God is a terror to me, and because of his magnificence, I cannot endure. What is he saying? Listen, if I've done these things, and I don't know that I've done them, but God, because you're so smart, and because you see everything, if I've really done these things, well then let me know. If you're going to judge me, I don't think I've done anything wrong. But if I have done anything wrong, Lord, reveal to me and show me what I've done wrong. He says, if I have made gold my hope, or if I have said to find gold, you are my confidence. If I've rejoiced because my wealth was great, and because my hand has gained much, if I have observed the sun when it shines, or the moon moving in brightness, so that my heart has been secretly enticed, and my mouth has kissed my hand, this also would be an iniquity deserving of judgment, for I would have denied God who is above. If I have rejoiced at the destruction of him who hated me, or lifted up myself when evil found him, indeed I have not allowed my mouth to sin by asking for a curse on his soul. If the men of my tent have not said, who is there that has not been satisfied with his meat? But no sojourner had to lodge in the street, for I have opened my doors to the traveler. If I have covered my transgressions as Adam, by hiding my iniquity in my bosom, because I feared the great multitude, and dreaded the contempt of families, so that I kept silent, and did not go out of the door, oh, that I had one to hear me. Here is my mark. Oh, that the Almighty would answer me, that my prosecutor had written a book. Surely I would carry it on my shoulder and bind it on me like a crown. I would declare to him the number of my steps. Like a prince, I would approach him. Interestingly enough, the high priest of Israel, when God said to Moses, here's what I want the high priest to wear. Here's some of the things that he told the high priest to wear. One of them was an ephod, and in the ephod I want sewn into it precious stones, right? One for every tribe of Israel. Okay, I want precious stones sewed into the ephod. Why? Because I want the children of Israel to know that they are precious and they are close to my heart. But I also want you to take onyx stones, and I want you to engrave the names of the tribes of Israel in the onyx stones, and I want you to put that on the shoulders of the ephod, so that while the priest is always a living testimony of the fact that the people of Israel are precious in the Lord's heart, he's also carrying the iniquity of their sin. Onyx is what color? Is black. And I want him to wear a turban on his head, and on the turban I want there to be inscribed, Holy unto the Lord. And if you have this understanding, this idea of a high priest, and we've already brought forth the idea that Job was acting as high priest even for his own family as he's sacrificing on their behalf and all that. He's saying, okay, well, that's one thing for me to do this for them, but who's going to do this for me? Who's going to consider me to be precious, and who's going to carry my sin and iniquity on his shoulders, and who's going to be separate and holy unto the Lord? Who can atone for me? He says, oh, that I had one to hear me. Here is my mark. Oh, that the Almighty would answer me, that my prosecutor had written a book. Well, there is a book that's written, right? There are books that are written. There's a Lamb's Book of Life for those of us who have turned our lives and given the control of our lives over to Jesus, the Messiah. Our names have been written into the book that says what? Their sin has been paid for. Books are opened in heaven. We read it in the Revelation. Not just a book, but books are opened. You see the Lamb's Book of Life. You see the names of believers written there. Yes, the one who's accusing us is accusing us of all of these sins. And yes, we've committed every one that he's accusing. But then you see our name in the book, and there it is in the book. It says, oh, well, their sin's already been paid for. They don't owe the Lord anything. It's been paid for by the blood of Jesus. Oh, that my prosecutor had written a book. Surely I would carry it on my shoulder and bind it on me like a crown. I would declare to him the number of my steps. Like a prince, I would approach him. I love Hebrews 4:16. Okay? There's only one God and only one mediator between God and men. And that is the man Christ Jesus. And through him, we can boldly approach the throne of God. He says, like a prince, I would approach him. If my land cries out against me and its furrows weep together, if I have eaten its fruit without money or caused its owners to lose their lives, then let thistles grow instead of wheat and weeds instead of barley. Then the words of Job were ended. Tomorrow we're going to read from a guy named Elihu. Guys, we do have a high priest who can empathize and sympathize with our pain, because he, being fully God, was also fully human. He knows what it's like to be a human. He knows what it's like to be tempted. He knows what it's like to live in this world, and he knows what it's like to feel pain and to feel it unjustly. Okay? There is a book written, and you have the opportunity to have your name written in it if you would simply turn from your sin and turn to Jesus and say, Jesus, take control of my life. And I believe. Now help me with my unbelief and teach me through your word. If you would believe it in your heart that he's the Lord, and you would confess it from your mouth that he's been raised from the dead, then you too will be saved. And then you're given the gift of the Holy Spirit, who now you can read the Bible, and he can start to show you what it means to truly know the Lord and to know his word and walk in his ways and live a life that pleases him. But it all starts with belief and knowing that man can be righteous before God, but only through Jesus Christ. Because while it's offered liberally to all, salvation is only offered exclusively through Jesus. Amen? Job's dilemma has been solved for us through the person of Jesus Christ. 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 Person of Jesus Christ.